Hey, what's up guys? I thought I'd do a video on a problem I'm having on my Q-Power. They've had for a little while now. I've heard from a couple people that had similar problems, so I figured I'd put out a video on this. Basically what's going on is I only ride this thing in dual motor mode because my other scooter is single motor, and if I'm going to ride a single motor scooter, that's my preference over this one because it's bigger and bulkier. So without the dual motors going, without that speed, I really don't want to ride this one. So that's the only way I ride this, with dual motors on. Dual motors running all the time and at pretty much full throttle, you're going to drain your battery quickly. But I started finding it was going less and less than I had previously. I don't know, I probably rode 20 miles, maybe 15 miles, certainly dual motor mode before, when I first got this with no problem. And it got down to the point where after 6.5 miles, this thing would cut out. Just the power would drop off on it. And basically what I found first is if I simply unplugged the controllers from the battery, both controllers from the battery, and then I could immediately plug them back on and the scooter to power up. I could run it again. However, I'd have to be careful, slow down, take it, put it into single motor mode, drive slower, because it would cut out again. If I tried to push it too hard, it would cut out again. But it got down to only like 6.5 miles and this was happening. So it's almost unrideable to me at that point. And so first couple things about this. There is a setting in the P settings under the display, P01, that is a low voltage cutoff setting for the scooter. And what I found is it does not work whatsoever. Okay, so there's P01 setting, and you'll notice in the bottom I have it set for 51 volts. So that's supposedly the low voltage cutoff. P01, low voltage cutoff setting, I have it set for 51 volts, meaning I would like it to shut off the battery, shut power down if the voltage drops to that point. You could actually go a little bit lower. I think 48 volts is you don't ever want to go lower than 48 with this 60 volt LiPo battery. But I put 51 in there, and I never ride it down that low anyway. So I ended up happening, I tried messing with that number in the P01 setting. I'm like, well, maybe 51 volts is too high, so I dropped it all the way down to its low end, which was like 29 volts or something. So basically it was turned off. And the same thing happened with the scooter. I then raised that setting to something ridiculous, like 62 volts or something like that. And if it were really doing something, it should not let the scooter run at any voltage lower than 62 volts. And I was lower than that, and it still ran. So that setting, the P01 setting in the display settings there that I just showed you, really has no effect on it, so you don't even need to worry about where that's set for. Anyway, so once I figured out that had no effect on it, now it comes down to two things. Something's shutting the scooter off. There's two possibilities: the controllers and the battery itself. The battery has a battery management system, a BMS is what it's called, circuit built into the front end, or sometimes it's on the side. But that circuit is in between the battery and your output ports. So it's kind of like you could call it like a smart fuse of sorts. It's basically monitoring current, voltage output, voltage input on your charging ports. And if anything's wrong, if you're putting too much voltage into it, if there's an overcurrent situation, and certain failure symptoms, it would cut off the battery, so to isolate the battery from the rest of the circuits. So at this point, I'm thinking, okay, it's either the battery or it's controllers. I'm not sure which. The controllers, if you look at them, and I've got these 35 amp controllers, if you also notice, there's a voltage listed there, 45 volts. This is in Chinese, but I know what that means. One, because I just guessed that's what it was. Two, my wife is Chinese, so I know what it says. And that voltage there, it shows 45 volts. That's the low voltage cutoff of these controllers. So basically that's saying this controller is not going to shut anything off until it gets down to 45 volts. So at that point, I still don't know, is it my battery? Is it my controllers? Well, I happen to be helping somebody with a problem with their Q-Power a while ago, and they couldn't get theirs running. So I had him send me his two controllers and his display throttle, and I tested those in my scooter, and they worked for him. I sent them back, but while I had his controllers and his throttle on my scooter, the exact same problem happened with the battery. I could go 6.6 miles or so, 6 or 7 miles, dual motor mode, full throttle, and it would just, power would die on it. So at that point, I'm like, okay, now I've tried 2 different sets of controllers. I have the same problem. The problem's likely not the controllers unless they both have some inherent design issue. More likely, the BMS in the battery is cutting this thing off. Likely, it's just a bad BMS circuit in the battery. Now, it's your experience with these batteries, making these batteries, working on them. You can replace the BMS. It could be done. I think you'd probably pay $150 for a new BMS, but it beating the price of a new battery. Some people can do it. I've never had any experience with these LiPo packs, taking them apart, and it's something I really don't care to delve into. So my choice is, I think I need a new battery at this point. So I went ahead and had one made, ordered one. I figured while I'm at it, this current Kiwa one is 26 amp hour. Right there, 60 volt, 26 amp hour. Now the amp hour is the size of the battery, the capacity. Think of it like a gas tank on a car. The bigger this amp hour rating, the more gas you would hold, or in this case, the more electricity, which means you can go further and you can keep your higher speeds for longer periods of time than if this were, say, like a 16 amp hour battery. Okay, so with dual motors, again, it really pulls power from the battery. I've kind of, in my riding style, which is pretty much high throttle, dual motor mode, it really sucks the battery down. And for my particular liking, 26 amp hour is not nearly enough for the scooter. So I figured, well, I'm going to get a new battery anyway. I might as well take some measurements because I have these smaller 35 amp controllers, which give you more room. And I gave them measurements for a little bit longer. I think it's maybe this much longer than this battery. It's going to be 35 amp hours, so it's going to be a lot larger capacity. I should be able to maintain speeds for longer and go further distances. Okay, so just real quick, I'm going to show you exactly what was going on with this. Okay, so what I'm doing right now is I disconnected one of my charge ports from the scooter. So I still have everything connected where the scooter will run. I got it up on a stool so the wheels are off the ground. And I just disconnected one of my charge ports, and I have my meter connected to that charge port going up here. So it's measuring my battery currently at 63.6 volts. I have the display turned on. You can also see the voltage under display if you push the power button 3 times, I think. 1, 2, 3. If you look in the bottom there, it says 63.8. I got 63.6 down here, so they're pretty close. This one's pretty close. Not as accurate as a real meter, but it's within a few tenths. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to run the throttle, turn on both motors, and then run the throttle and hook this band around here to hold it, because I know what it was doing before. I don't know if it's changed, but it was dropping off right when it changed to 59.8 volts, I believe, or maybe it was 58.8, but we'll find out, somewhere in that area. And so I'm just going to run that same test here just to show you what's going on. I'm going to measure the voltage while it's running so we see exactly where it drops out at. Okay, so I got it running with that band around the throttle there. Currently we're at 63.4 volts, so it's going to have to burn off a few volts here. 60.1. And it cuts out right there. 60.1. The voltage completely cut out. And as you can see, the battery is completely shut off. I'm still measuring the battery. The voltage went down to 6 or 7 volts. So the battery is shut down. It actually seems a little worse than it was before, because before it was 59.8 where it shut off. Now it's 60.1 shortly after it changes to 60.1. Seems like it's getting worse, so maybe it's not the BMS, maybe it's some of the cells in the battery itself. 60 volts is the nominal, the mid-range of the battery. Fully charged is like 66.8, and at the low end you should be able to go down to probably, I think, around 48 volts, at least 51 before anything shuts off. So shutting off at 60 volts instead of 50, 51, I'm losing 9 volts of power there that, like I said, that's a third of my battery I can't use, or actually half of my battery I can't use. I can only run it down to mid-range 60 volts. So I think this battery's shot. Just to show you what would happen, my battery is in the shut-off condition. I'm still measuring the voltage on my charge port there. It's getting 8 volts. Previously, like I said, if I just disconnected my controllers from the battery and plugged them back on, it would work again. What I think that was actually doing is when I took the load off by disconnecting controllers, the battery voltage probably creeped up 3 or 4 or maybe half a volt just because the load was off, and then plugging it back on, it was still high enough where it would run. But then once it got back down to that same place it was cutting off at, it would just shut off again. Now it won't even do that. If I unplug these and plug them back on, it still won't start up. My voltage won't come back until I plug my charger, have my charger plugged into the wall. I'm going to plug that onto my port. And you can see as soon as I do that, it's reading 61 volts. Well, that's now the charger is actually charging the battery, so that's the level it's currently at. Now if I pull the charger off, because it's been on there even just a short time, it's going to be a tenth or 2 higher. So see, now it's at 60.7. We'll run it again. 60.1, 60. Should be about ready to cut off, I think. Oh, there we go. So just under 60 volts, and it cuts off. So same scenario. And again, so plugging on my charger onto the charge port will bring the voltage back, because at that point it's running on the charger. But at the same time, the charger is charging the battery a little bit. Even if you pull it off like I did, 30 seconds later, it's charged it up a few tenths. As soon as you run those few tenths off, it cuts off right at the same place again. So that's pretty much it. Bad battery. And I'll give you guys an update once I get my new battery installed and test it out. If you're having problems like that, if you want, drop me an email if you have any questions or anything, and I'll get back to you. All right, guys, take care.